Hey guys, tonight we are going to close our eyes and travel, not just through space, but through a different way of knowing history itself. We're heading to medieval West Africa, a land of sprawling empires built on gold, salt, and stories. But there is a catch. You can't bring your books, your phone, or your Wikipedia tabs. Here, history is written down. It is spoken, sung, and lived. Your guide, your teacher, your entire historical record is a person. We're entering the world of the Griot, the living library. The training program is a little more intense than getting a library card. And honestly, you might not last the first week. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine the air thick with the scent of dried earth, smoked fish, and something sweet, maybe mangoes from a nearby stall. The sun is a heavy, warm blanket on your shoulders. You're standing at the edge of a bustling marketplace in a town like Nionai, the capital of the great Mali Empire. The year is, let's say, Yosangwuding. People chatter in the Mandinka language, a melodic flow of sounds as they trade pottery, vibrant textiles, and salt slabs that have traveled hundreds of miles across the Sahara. It is a world of vibrant, tangible reality, but you're here to find something less tangible, the past. You don't go to a building filled with dusty scrolls. Instead, you look for a man seated in the shade of a baobab tree. He holds a unique instrument, a 21-string harp lute called a kora. This is a Griot, or as he would call himself, a Jeli. He isn't just a musician or a storyteller for entertainment. You're looking at a walking, talking archive. In your world, history is a collection of documents, artifacts, and peer-reviewed papers. Here, it's a craft passed down through bloodlines. This man's mind holds the entire story of his people. He can recite the lineage of the Keita dynasty, the founders of the Mali Empire, going back generations without a single hesitation. He knows the laws, the great battles, the epic poems, and the subtle social customs that hold this society together. He is the community's memory, its conscience, and its soul, all embodied in one person. To forget him would be like burning a national library to the ground. You watch as a local dignitary approaches him, bowing his head slightly in respect. The dignitary has a dispute with a neighbor over land, and he needs a precedent. The Griot listens intently, his eyes closed. He doesn't consult a book. He consults the vast, intricate web of memory inside him. Then he begins to speak, his voice steady and clear. He recounts a similar case from the time of the current king's great-grandfather, detailing the judgment that was passed. His word is final. It carries the weight of generations of established truth. This is a society built not on what is written, but on what is remembered and agreed upon. Here's a little detail you might not expect. This revered figure, this holder of all knowledge, also occupies a strange and somewhat ambiguous place in the social hierarchy. Griots are part of a specific hereditary caste. They are deeply respected, even feared for the power their words hold. A Griot's praise can elevate a man, while his criticism can ruin a family's reputation for centuries. Yet, at the same time, they are set apart. In some ancient traditions, it was considered so taboo for a Griot's blood to touch the earth that if they were to be executed, they would be placed inside a hollow tree trunk instead. They are both essential and separate, the ultimate insiders who are, by the nature of their craft, also outsiders. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the market square, the Griot begins to play his kora. The notes ripple through the cooling air, a complex, beautiful melody. He starts to sing not just any song, but an epic. He is telling the story of Sanjaya Keita, the Lion King, the founder of the very empire you're standing in. His voice transports his listeners. They are no longer in a market in 1350. They are on the battlefield with Sanjaya, feeling his sorrow and his triumph. The children sit mesmerized, absorbing the story that defines who they are. They are learning their history not as a list of dates, but as a living, breathing narrative. While you are here as a visitor for them, this is the very fabric of their identity, and a crucial question that historians still debate today is where exactly this powerful tradition came from. Did it evolve from a single root deep in West African history? Or did different groups independently develop these living libraries to meet the needs of their growing societies? The answer, like so much of this oral world, is carried on the breeze in the notes of the kora. The notes of the kora continue to weave through the twilight, and you're no longer just an observer. You're part of the circle of listeners. The fire in the center of the square crackles, sending sparks up towards a sky now littered with stars. The Griot's voice rises and falls, and even if you don't understand every word of the Mandinka language, you understand the emotion. You feel the tension of the battle, the sorrow of a hero's exile, the joy of his triumphant return, and a thought, born from your own world, might be nagging at you. This is amazing, but why not just write it down? Wouldn't a book be safer, more permanent? It's a logical question from a world that trusts paper and pixels more than people. But here in the heart of the Mali Empire, that question misses the point entirely. In fact, a written document would be seen as a far weaker, less reliable way to store the truth. Think about it. In your time, literacy is nearly universal. But, here and now, the ability to read and write Arabic, the script of scholars and long-distance traders, is a highly specialized skill. It belongs to the clerics at the mosque, or the king's financial administrators. For the blacksmith, the farmer, the soldier, or the weaver, the world of knowledge is oral. A decree written on parchment would be meaningless to them. But a message delivered by a griot, performed with the correct intonation and musical cues that signal its importance, is understood by everyone. It's the most effective form of mass communication there is. An empire this vast, stretching from the Atlantic coast deep into the Sahara, isn't held together by paperwork. It's held together by a network of voices, by a shared understanding carried on the sound waves of a griot song. Furthermore, there's the question of trust. A piece of paper is a silent, static thing. It can't defend itself. It can't answer your questions. It can't look you in the eye. Who's to say it wasn't forged? Who's to say the person who wrote it wasn't lying? But a griot's authority is alive. His reputation, earned over a lifetime and inherited through his lineage, is his guarantee. When he speaks, he is not just reciting data, he is testifying. The audience, many of whom have heard versions of these stories their whole lives, acts as a living fact-checker. If you were to stray too far from the accepted narrative, the murmurs in the crowd would correct him. Truth in this context is an interactive performance, not a solitary act of reading. It's a communal agreement, constantly refreshed and reaffirmed every time it is told. A book can be lost or burned, but a story that lives in the minds of 1,000 people is far harder to destroy. This is why the king doesn't just send messengers with scrolls, he sends griots. When a new law is passed or a diplomatic agreement is made, a griot is dispatched from the capital. He travels to the provincial towns, and he doesn't just read a proclamation. He performs it. He explains its history, its necessity, using stories and proverbs to make its meaning clear and memorable. His performance gives the law weight and legitimacy in a way a simple text never could. He can adapt his telling to the specific audience, emphasizing the points most relevant to them. It's a dynamic, responsive system of governance, and it's incredibly sophisticated. Here's a curious side effect of this oral system. It prizes memory and eloquence above all else. A person's worth is often measured by their ability to speak well and to remember the traditions of their people. In this world, having a good memory isn't just a useful skill for an exam. It's a pillar of social standing and wisdom. The griot is the pinnacle of this ideal, but the value permeates the entire culture. In legal disputes, the testimony of a respected elder who remembers a past agreement often holds more weight than any written contract a merchant might produce. Of course, the arrival of Islam in West Africa introduced the written word in a major way, and this created a fascinating dynamic. Historians still argue about whether these two systems, the written scroll of the Islamic scholar and the spoken word, the griot, were peaceful partners or quiet rivals. Some evidence suggests they serve different functions in a complementary way. A king like the legendary Mansa Musa, a devout Muslim, might use written Arabic for keeping tax records, corresponding with other rulers in the Islamic world, and studying the Quran. But for uniting the diverse peoples within his own empire, for communicating with the 90% of his subjects who did not read, and for grounding his rule in the ancient traditions of his ancestors, he would turn to his Griot. The scroll was for bureaucracy and theology, the song was for the soul of the nation. It was a dual system of knowledge, each powerful in its own realm. As the fire dies down and the Griot finishes his tale for the night, you realize you've just witnessed the engine of an empire at work. An engine powered not by ink, but by the extraordinary capacity of the human voice and memory. The embers of the fire glow softly, and the crowd begins to melt away into the darkness, their minds still echoing with the deeds of ancient kings. You linger for a moment, watching the Griot carefully wrap his kora in a protective cloth. A question forms in your mind, a question about the man himself. How did he get this job? What university did he attend? What master did he apprentice under? You're still thinking in terms of career choices, of paths one can select. The reality here is far more profound and inescapable. You don't choose to become a Griot. You are born one. This society is structured around a system of hereditary professions, which some scholars call castes. The Mand people refer to them as Nymakala. These are families who are the designated keepers of specific essential skills. The blacksmiths, the Numuw, are born into families that hold the secrets of fire and iron, a powerful and mystical craft. The leather workers, the Griots, inherit the knowledge of tanning and shaping hides. And the Griots, the Jeliw, are born into families that hold the secrets of history, diplomacy, and the spoken word. It's a bit like being born into a family of, say, doctors or lawyers, but 100 times more binding. This isn't just what your family does, it is who your family is. Imagine you were born into one of the great Griot clans, the Coyote, the Diabate, the Sissoko. From the moment you take your first breath, your destiny is set. You will never be a warrior king. You will never be a wealthy merchant. You will never till the soil as a farmer. Your life's purpose is pre-written. You are to be a vessel for the stories of your people. This knowledge, the skill known as Jeliw, is considered to be in your very blood. It's a sacred inheritance, a spiritual DNA passed down from your ancestors. The belief is that only a Griot is built to handle the immense power of the spoken word. Here's a fascinating detail that illustrates this. Many Mand cultures believe in a spiritual energy or life force called Nyma. The act of transforming things, turning or into a spear, a silent tree into a sounding drum, or a past event into a powerful story, releases this Nyma. The Nyma of a king's history is especially potent and can be dangerous for an ordinary person to handle. Only a Nymakala, like a Griot, has the innate spiritual constitution to manage this energy without being harmed by it. So, a king's son can't just decide to tell his own father's story in an official capacity. It would be spiritually reckless. It takes a Griot to safely channel that power and give it voice. This is why the Griot's role is not just a profession. It's a sacred, spiritual duty that no one else can perform. This system provides an incredible degree of social stability. Everyone knows their place and their function. The son of a blacksmith knows he will inherit the forge. The daughter of a Griot knows she will learn the songs. There is no uncertainty, no crisis of career choice, but it also creates a rigid social structure. If you are born a Griot with the soul of a farmer, you cannot simply change your path. Your blood defines your contribution to society. Of course, the rigidity of this system is a topic of intense debate among historians and anthropologists. Was there truly no social mobility? Some evidence suggests that while the core principle was hereditary, exceptions could be made. A king might elevate a favored individual, or a family's fortunes could rise and fall, blurring the lines. Furthermore, scholars argue whether the term caste, with its heavy associations from the Indian subcontinent, is even the right word to use. Some prefer hereditary profession or clans of artisanship, arguing that the West African system was more about social function and interdependence than a strict hierarchy of purity and pollution. It's a conversation that continues to this day, highlighting the difficulty of fitting complex, living societies into neat academic boxes. But for you, a child born into a Griot family, these academic debates are meaningless. All you know is that your father is a Griot, and his father was before him, and his father before him, stretching back to the time of the great Sanjay Ade himself. Your path is laid out before you like a well-worn road. You are not just going to learn a skill, you are going to become who you were always meant to be. And that journey, the long and arduous transformation from a child into a living library, begins almost as soon as you can walk. Your training is about to start. Your childhood is not one of quiet play but of constant immersive listening. While other children are chasing lizards in the dust, you are sitting at your father's feet. His voice, deep and resonant, is the soundtrack to your life. The lullabies he sings you are not simple tunes. They are genealogies, lists of names and deeds that rock you to sleep. The stories he tells you are not fairy tales. They are the foundational epics of your people. You are a sponge, and what you are soaking up is history itself. Your training has begun, though it feels less like training and more like breathing. The first lessons are deceptively simple. It starts with a single thread, your own lineage. You are the son of FOD. Your uncle tells you one afternoon. Who was the son of Bakari? Who was the son of Nankoman? He makes you repeat, again and again. It's not a tedious drill. It's the anchoring of your own identity. This thread is the first stone laid in the foundation of the vast structure you will build inside your mind. This is your memory palace. Right now it's just a single humble room, but you will spend your entire life adding wings, corridors, and courtyards to it. Next, you learn the kora. Your hands are still small, struggling to stretch across the 21 strings. Your master, perhaps an older cousin, doesn't hand you a book of musical theory. He shows you. He plays a phrase, a simple, looping melody, and tells you, this is the tune for the House of Tror. He plays another, more complex and somber. This one is for the Keita Kings. You learn that music and memory are not separate things. They are woven together. The melody is a key that unlocks a specific drawer of information. Years from now, when a patron asks you about the lineage of a certain noble family, you won't search your mind for a name. You will search for a tune. The music will come first, and the names will follow, carried along on the stream of the melody. Your curriculum expands. From your own family, you move to the genealogies of the other major clans, the noble families, the warrior families, the other artisan groups like the blacksmiths. You are learning the social blueprint of your entire society. Who can marry whom? Which families have an ancient friendship, and which have a long simmering feud. This isn't just trivia. It's essential knowledge for a future diplomat and advisor. A misplaced compliment or an ignorant remark could reignite a conflict that has been dormant for 100 years. You are learning that a Griot's words have real-world consequences. Then come the great stories. You don't learn the epic of Sanjay Ade by reading it. You absorb it, piece by piece, over years. One night, your mother might sing the section about Sanjay Atiya's mother, Soji Olon, the Buffalo Woman. Another time you'll hear your father perform the thrilling account of the final battle against the sorcerer king Suma Orokonte. The story is all around you, living in the mouths of your relatives. It is taught to you in layers, the same way a painter builds up color on a canvas. Here's a piece of the training that is never explicitly stated, but is perhaps the most important lesson of all. You are learning what not to say. You are taught that not all knowledge is for all ears. Some stories are public, meant for the festival square. Others are private, meant only for the ears of a king or the head of a specific family. This is a critical skill. You are being entrusted with the secrets of the nation, the potentially embarrassing histories, the tales of defeats as well as victories. Knowing when to speak, and more importantly, when to stay silent, is a mark of a true Griot. You are not just a hard doctor storing data. You are an intelligent, discerning processor who must manage the data with wisdom and discretion. This brings us to a question that historians still actively puzzle over. How uniform was this education? Did a Griot in the capital city of Neon I learn the exact same, word-for-word version of the Sanjay epic as a Griot from a remote provincial town? Or was there room for creative interpretation? Some scholars argue for a model of creative performance, suggesting that each Griot would adapt the story for their audience, perhaps adding a little flourish to flatter their current patron or emphasizing a particular ancestor to make a political point. Others argue that the core narratives were incredibly stable, and that the musical structures and poetic meter acted as powerful constraints, preventing the story from changing too much. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. The skeleton of the story remained the same, but each Griot would put their own flesh and skin upon it. For now, you are just learning the bones. The artistry will come later. Your mind is growing, becoming a cathedral of names and notes, a living library preparing to open its doors. Your memory palace now has its foundations, but every library needs a key. And for you, that key is not made of metal, but of wood, gourd, and sound. It is time to truly master the kora. This instrument is not just an accompaniment to your voice. It will become your partner, your co-conspirator in the act of remembering. It is the external hard drive for the data stored in your mind. The instrument itself feels alive in your hands. You hold the large, smooth calabash gourd, cut in half and covered with a tightly stretched cowhide, against your body. It feels warm, resonant. The long rosewood neck stretches away from you, and from its spring the 21 strings in a delicate, decided fan. You don't hold it like a guitar. Instead, you grip the 2 wooden handles that stick out from the sides, leaving your thumbs and index fingers free to pluck the strings. It's an intimate posture, as if you are embracing the source of the music. Your first lessons are a trial of patience and pain. Your fingertips, soft and useless until now, will complain bitterly. They will sting, and they will blister. But slowly, calluses will form, little shields of hardened skin that mark your dedication. Your master does not use sheet music. There are no written exercises. It's a far cry from a neatly printed Learn Kora in 30 Days book. The entire education is a process of watch, listen, and copy. Your master plays a short, cyclical pattern, a melody that seems to fold in on itself, repeating with subtle variations. This is the Kumbengo, the steady, looping backbone of the song. Your task is to replicate it, not just the notes, but the rhythm, the feel, the soul of it. You will play it for hours, until your fingers move without conscious thought, until the pattern is etched into your muscle memory. Once you have mastered the Kumbengo of a particular song, you learn its counterpart, the Go. These are the fast, intricate, improvisational riffs that dance over the top of the steady rhythm. This is where the artistry lies. If the Kumbengo is the landscape of the story, the Go is the lightning flash, the hero's cry, the glint of a sword. It is the punctuation, the exclamation point, the flourish that makes the audience lean in closer. Learning this requires a different kind of skill, not just repetition, but a deep understanding of the story you are telling, so you can embellish it with the right emotional texture. Here's a small detail about the instrument you might not notice at first. Attached to the bridge is a metal plate with rings or loops of wire. As you play, it creates a subtle, buzzing undertone that blends with the clear notes of the strings. In your world, a buzzing string on an instrument is considered an imperfection, something to be fixed. Here, it is essential. It gives the kora its signature sound, a shimmering aura that many believe is pleasing to the spirits, including the jinn that are sometimes said to inhabit the instrument itself. Some griots speak to their kora as if it is a living being, asking it to help them remember a forgotten passage or to speak clearly to the hearts of the listeners. You are learning that each song, each mode, and each tuning is a mnemonic key. When your master says, "Play the tune of the kante," your hands find the notes, and your mind immediately begins to populate with the history of the sorcerer King Suma Oro Kante, the great adversary of Sanjay. The music is the filing system. You don't have to think, "Now I will recall the chapter on the Battle of Kirene." You simply start playing the Song of Kirene, and the story unfolds in your mind, guided and prompted by the notes your fingers are plucking. The melody carries the narrative, ensuring the proper sequence, rhythm, and mood of the telling. The precise origin of this incredible instrument is, naturally, a subject that historians and musicologists love to discuss. While the Griot tradition itself is ancient, the kora in its current 21-string form might be a more recent innovation, perhaps solidifying its form only in the last few centuries, well after the golden age of the Mali Empire. Some evidence points to earlier, simpler harp roots that may have been its ancestors. Scholars examine old travelogues, compare old traditions, and analyze the instrument's construction to piece together its family tree. For them, it's an academic puzzle. For you, it is simply the voice of your ancestors. It is the tool of your trade, the key to your mind, and you are slowly, painfully, but surely learning its language. The blisters on your fingers have long since turned to calluses, tough as old leather. The boy who sat at his father's feet is gone, and in his place stands a young man whose mind is a carefully organized labyrinth of stories and songs. Years have passed in this immersive education. You can now trace genealogies like they are lines on the palm of your hand and play the kora in your sleep. But knowledge and skill are not enough. You have not yet earned the right to be called a jeli. For that, you must face the final trial. It is not a written exam in a quiet room. It is a public and deeply personal ordeal. One morning, you are summoned. The elders of your clan, the master Griots whose reputations stretch across the savanna, are gathered. They sit on carved stools in the shade of a great silk cotton tree, their faces impassive, their eyes holding the weight of centuries. This is your examining board. Your patron family, perhaps the local chief or a wealthy merchant, may also be present, for your success or failure reflects upon them as well. The air is thick with unspoken pressure. There is no curriculum to study, no cheat sheet. Your entire life has been the preparation. Your master, the man who guided you through the pain of your first calluses, nods to you. It is time. Use it, cradling your kora. The first part of the test is a marathon of memory and endurance. Tell us of the kid, as one of the elders says, his voice dry as dust. He isn't asking for a summary. He is asking for the epic. You begin to play the Kumbengo, the foundational melody, and you start to sing. You sing of the two brothers who vied for the throne, of the prophecy of the buffalo woman, of the exile of the boy king's son Jade. Your voice must be strong, your kora playing flawless. But they are listening for more than just accuracy. They are listening for the soul of the story. Do you understand the sorrow in a mother's heart? Can you convey the fire of a warrior's rage? You perform for hours under the hot sun. Your throat grows dry, your fingers ache, but you cannot stop. To falter is to fail. This is a test of physical and mental stamina, proving that you have the constitution to be the carrier of these monumental tales. Here's a part of the test that no one ever explains to you directly. As you perform, you might be tempted to show off, to fill your performance with every flashy berry mint and go if you know. But the true masters are listening for something else, restraint. They are testing your wisdom. They want to see if you understand that the story is the star, not the storyteller. True mastery lies in serving the narrative, not overwhelming it. They are watching to see if you have the humility required of a true Griot. After what feels like an eternity, as the shadows begin to lengthen, the performance part of the trial ends. But you are not finished. Now comes the cross-examination. This is the part that tests not just what you know, but how you think. An elder will pose a complex legal problem. A man from the Savanna clan loaned cattle to a man from the Kamara clan 3 generations ago. The debt was never repaid. But now the Savanna want the great-grandchildren of those cattle back. What is the precedent? You cannot hesitate. You must search the vast library of your mind, find the relevant case law from the annals of history, and deliver a judgment, explaining your reasoning based on the ancient traditions. They will challenge you with impossibly tangled genealogies, with obscure historical riddles, and with questions of diplomacy. They are confirming that you are not just a tape recorder, but an advisor, a judge, and a diplomat in the making. Of course, historians and anthropologists still puzzle over the specifics of this graduation. Was it always a single, high-stakes public event like this, or was it a more organic process? Some scholars suggest that a young Griot's graduation was more of a gradual acceptance, marked by being allowed to perform at more and more important events, slowly building a reputation until he was simply recognized as a master in his own right. The idea of a formal, One-day examination might be a dramatization, a way of telescoping a years-long process into a single, representative story. The truth is, the process likely varied from region to region and from one Griot clan to another. For you, in this moment, the experience is intensely real. The final question has been answered. Silence descends upon the gathering. The elders look at one another, a silent conversation passing between them. Then, the chief among them gives a slow, deliberate nod. A smile finally breaks across your master's face. You have passed. A wave of relief so profound it almost brings you to your knees washes over you. You are no longer an apprentice. You are a JELI. And later that night, your master will call you to his side and begin to tell you the real secrets, the knowledge that is never spoken in public, the stories behind the stories. This is your true graduation. You have just been handed the keys to the innermost chambers of the library. The euphoria of your graduation fades, replaced by something heavier, more sobering. A new set of doors is opened to you, leading not to a festival ground, but to the very heart of power. You are summoned to the court of the Mansa, the king. You are to become his JELI, his personal Griot. This is the pinnacle of your profession. You are no longer just telling the stories of kings. You are now whispering in the ear of one. Your first day at court is a dizzying experience. You trade the open sky and dusty earth of the village square for the cool, dim interior of the royal hall. The air inside is different, perfumed with incense and the faint, leathery scent of wealth. Light filters through narrow openings high in the adobe walls, illuminating dust motes dancing like tiny spirits. Woven hangings in intricate geometric patterns cover the walls, their colors rich and deep. The king sits on a raised platform, draped in fine cotton and adorned with the gold that has made this empire legendary. His counselors and ministers sit before him on carpets, their faces serious and watchful. And you are given a place of honor, not on the platform with the king, but close by, on a stool of your own. Everyone sees you. Everyone understands what your presence means. You are the king's memory. The business of the day begins. Provincial governors give their reports, merchants petition for new trade routes, and military commanders speak of skirmishes on the empire's fringes. You listen, absorbing everything, filing it away. Then, a dispute arises. Two powerful families are arguing over the water rights to a tributary of the Niger River. Both present compelling arguments. The counselors are divided. The hall grows quiet as the king steeples his fingers, his brow furrowed in thought. Then he turns his head slightly and his eyes find yours. He doesn't ask, what is the law? He asks, what is the story? This is your moment. You take your kora, not to perform an epic, but to do something far more delicate. You begin a quiet, thoughtful melody, and you tell a story. You recount the tale of the king's great-grandfather who faced a similar dilemma. You describe how he resolved it, not with a simple edict, but with a clever compromise that turned the rival families into partners, forcing them to maintain the waterway together. You don't tell the king what to do. You simply lay the wisdom of his ancestors at his feet. You provide the historical context, the map of past successes and failures. The king listens, and a slow nod of understanding ripples through the court. A decision has been made, guided by your words. In this moment, you feel the immense, terrifying power of your role. You are not merely a historian. You are a political strategist whose chief weapon is narrative. Here's a nuance of your position that an outsider would never understand. Your relationship with the king is not one of an employee to a boss. You are his Yadaiji, a man term that means something like a host, patron, and protector, all rolled into one. It's a sacred, symbiotic bond. He is responsible for your well-being, but you are responsible for his legacy and, at times, his conscience. This bond affords you a unique privilege. You are one of the only people who can criticize the king without losing your head. Of course, you cannot do it directly. You can't just say, Your Majesty, that new tax policy is a terrible idea. Instead, you would request an audience, and you would tell a story about a foolish king from a distant land who impoverished his people with greedy taxes and was ultimately overthrown. The message is delivered, the criticism is voiced, but it is veiled in allegory. It is a sophisticated political dance, and you must be a master of its steps. This proximity to power leads to a fundamental question that keeps modern historians busy. Just how much real influence did the Griots wield? Were they truly shaping policy from the shadows, genuine kingmakers whose stories could steer the ship of state? Or were they, in essence, highly sophisticated ministers of propaganda? Some academics argue that the Griots' primary function was to legitimize the king's power, to sing his praises, and to frame his decisions in the glorious context of his heroic ancestors, regardless of the decision's actual merit. Others contend that this view is too cynical and that a king who ignored the wisdom of his Griot did so at his peril, risking not just a bad outcome, but a break with the sacred traditions that gave his rule legitimacy in the first place. The reality, as is so often the case, was likely a complex blend of both. The Griot was both advisor and validator, a source of wisdom and a tool of power. As you sit in the quiet hall, the king having retired for the day, you feel the weight of this duality. The stories in your head are not just tales for entertainment. They are precedents, warnings, and blueprints for the future. A word from you could avert a war or accidentally start one. You are the guardian of the empire's memory, and that memory is a living thing, actively shaping the present with every story you choose to tell. Your role as the king's advisor is not always played out in the grand theater of statecraft and war. More often it is practiced in the quiet, intimate spaces where the empire's future is truly forged, in the negotiation of alliances. And the most powerful alliance is not signed with ink, but sealed with blood through marriage. One day a delegation arrives from a powerful neighboring clan, seeking to marry their son to the king's own daughter. They come bearing gifts, gold dust, fine cloth, prized horses. The proposal is advantageous, promising to unite two influential lineages and create a buffer zone on a restless border. The king is pleased. His counselors are nodding, but before he gives his answer, his gaze once again falls upon you. Your task now is not to recount a heroic epic, but to perform a far more delicate kind of recitation. You are the kingdom's living pedigree database. In your mind, you must now unspool the entire lineage of this suitor's family, tracing it back not just 1 or 2 generations, but 10 or more. You are not just checking for royal blood or hidden scandals. You are scanning for something deeper, the invisible architecture of social obligation and ancient taboo. Did one of their ancestors betray one of ours in a forgotten battle 300 years ago? Was there a promise of marriage between these two houses that was broken in the time of the king's great-great-grandfather? Is there a curse, a sworn oath of enmity that has been passed down through the generations? You close your eyes and the names flow through your mind, each connected to a story, a place, a relationship. It is a complex, 3-dimensional map of human connection. To an outsider, it would look like an impossibly tangled web. To you, it is a perfectly ordered blueprint. You see the connections, the alliances, the feuds. You navigate it with the ease of a man walking through his own home. After a long silence, you open your eyes and give the king a subtle nod. The lineage is clean. The alliance is sound. A collective sigh of relief ripples through the hall. You have just prevented a potential diplomatic disaster born from a forgotten slight. Your knowledge has kept the peace. Here's a curious social mechanism you must be a master of, something that complicates your mental blueprint. The San and Kaya, or joking relationship. This is a formal inherited bond between two clans that, on the surface, looks like rivalry. For example, the Chor clan and the Daira clan might have a San and Kaya. When they meet, they are culturally obligated to mock and tease each other, trading insults about the supposed cowardice of their ancestors or the ugliness of their children. To an outsider, it would look like the prelude to a fight, but it's the exact opposite. It's a form of ritualized friendship. The insults are a reminder of their ancient, unbreakable bond. The rule is that they must tease, but they must also help each other in any time of need. It's a brilliant social safety valve, allowing tensions to be released in harmless, structured jest. As a Griot, you must know all these San and Kaya relationships. Knowing which clans can joke with each other is just as important as knowing which are sworn enemies. You use this knowledge constantly. Imagine two hot-headed nobles in the king's court arguing heatedly over a point of honor. Tensions rise. Just before it boils over, You might step forward with a smile and say, "Of course Akeda would say that. We all know your ancestor was so scared of Suma or OS magic he tried to hide in a cooking pot." Akeda is honor-bound to laugh at the insult coming from you, a coyote, because your clans have just such a relationship. The tension is instantly broken, the anger dissipated by laughter and tradition. It is a form of peacemaking that is far more effective than any royal decree. But this brings us to a difficult and much debated aspect of your craft. How pure is the information you hold? Patrons are generous, but they also have egos. A powerful family might want to polish its history a little. They might pressure you to conveniently forget a less than heroic ancestor, or to subtly invent a connection to a more prestigious line. This is the great ethical tightrope that all Griots must walk. Historians still argue fiercely about the historical reliability of oral genealogies. Were Griots in Korkapit archives, faithfully preserving the truth, no matter how unflattering? Or were they skilled artists who knew that history, like a good story, could sometimes be improved with a little editing to please a wealthy client? Some scholars believe that the system had a built-in fact-checker, the audience. If a Griot strayed too far from the accepted truth, other Griots or knowledgeable elders in the audience would know, and the Griot's reputation would be shattered. Others argue that this pressure was often outweighed by the need to survive and prosper, and that genealogies were likely fluid things, subtly changing over time to reflect the current social and political realities. The truth is, you feel this pressure every day. It is the quiet battle between your duty to the past and the demands of the present. For now, you hold the line. You understand that these genealogies are not just lists of names. They are the threads that weave the very fabric of society. Your job is to keep them from unraveling. Your expertise in the delicate threads of lineage has not gone unnoticed. It has made you a master of maintaining internal harmony. But the empire is vast, and its borders are stitched together with treaties and oaths that are just as complex as any genealogy. One day, the king calls you not to the main hall but to his private chambers. A provincial governor on the empire's farthest stage, a powerful chief in his own right, has grown quiet. He has not sent his yearly tribute of ivory and salt, and troubling whispers speak of him entertaining envoys from a rival kingdom. To send a general with an army would be to provoke the war you seek to avoid. To send a written decree would be impersonal and easily ignored. The king needs to send a message that is both a warning and a hand of reconciliation. He needs to send you. Your journey is long. You travel for weeks, not as a solitary wanderer, but as a representative of the king himself. You carry a special staff, carved from ebony and capped with silver, a symbol of your office that grants you safe passage through any territory loyal to the Mansa. But your true passport is your identity. You are a Jeli. Your person is sacrosanct. This concept of diplomatic immunity is one of the most powerful unwritten laws of the land. To harm a messenger, especially a Griot envoy, is more than just a crime. It is a blasphemous act. It is to attack the king's own voice, to sever the lines of communication and declare war in the most definitive way possible. So you travel with little fear of bandits, but with the immense weight of your mission settling deeper with every mile. When you finally arrive at the provincial court, you are not shuffled in like a common petitioner. You are announced, and the governor, this proud and silent chief, receives you in his main hall. It is a mirror of your own king's court, only smaller, the air charged with a tense, defiant energy. The chief is surrounded by his own warriors and his own Griot. You see the immediate understanding in his Griot's eyes. This will not be a simple meeting. This will be a duel of narratives, a negotiation between two living histories. You do not begin with the king's grievance. That would be the clumsy work of an amateur. You begin as is proper with praise. You take out your kora, and you play the melody of the governor's house. You sing of his great-grandfather, a legendary warrior who fought alongside the king's own grandfather in the wars of expansion. You recount his victories, his courage, his loyalty. You are not just flattering him. You are reminding him, and everyone in his court, of the deep historical bonds of obligation and shared glory that tie his lineage to the throne. You are rebuilding the very foundation of the relationship that he has begun to neglect. Only then, after firmly establishing this context of shared history and respect, do you introduce the king's message. And you don't state it as a demand. You weave it into a story. You tell a parable of a mighty baobab tree and the strong branch that, in its pride, sought to grow away from the trunk, forgetting that its sap and its strength came from the same deep roots. The message is unmistakable, yet it allows the governor to save face. It is a warning wrapped in wisdom. And here in this tense hall, you face a situation that historians still debate with great passion. The governor, through his own Griot, responds. He does not refuse your message, but he raises a new point, a grievance about trade routes that he feels has been ignored by the capital. This was not in your instructions from the king. What do? This is the core of the debate about your role. Were you simply a human letter authorized only to deliver a message verbatim and carry a response back? Or were you a plenipotentiary, an ambassador with the authority to negotiate? Some scholars argue that the Griot's role was strictly defined. You were a high-fidelity recording and playback device. To improvise would be to overstep your bounds dramatically. But others contend that this view misunderstands the very nature of Jayalaya. A true master Griot, steeped in generations of legal and diplomatic precedent, would be expected to use his wisdom. He would know from 100 other stories the acceptable grounds for compromise. He would be empowered to conduct the negotiation himself, guided by the spirit, if not the letter, of the king's will. You make a choice, drawing on a story about a wise king who understood that a bent branch is better than a broken one. You suggest a new arrangement, a compromise that honors both the governor's complaint and the king's authority. You are not just reciting history. You are using it as a living toolkit to solve a present-day crisis. The tension in the room lessens, just slightly. A path to peace has been illuminated. You will carry the governor's renewed oath of loyalty, along with his counter-proposal, back to your king. Peace, for now, has been maintained, not by swords or seals, but by the careful, artful deployment of a story. Your return from the diplomatic mission is met with quiet approval from the king, but your work does not stop at the palace gates. In fact, some of your most vital duties are performed far from the rarefied air of the court, back in the bustling, everyday world of the community. You are not just the guardian of the king's history. You are the guardian of the people's history, which means you are also the keeper of their laws and customs. You are, in essence, the nation's unwritten constitution. Imagine a dispute erupts in the marketplace. It's not a matter of state, but it's stirring a rift in the community. A weaver accuses a dyer of ruining a valuable bolt of cotton with a batch of faulty indigo. The dyer insists the weaver provided him with poorly spun thread that couldn't hold the color. There is no written contract, no receipt. In your world, this might end up in a small claims court, bogged down in paperwork. Here the community turns to you. The two angry men are brought before you, and in the shade of the baobab tree, you become the judge. You don't consult a leather-bound legal code. You consult your mind. You listen patiently to both sides, then you close your eyes. You search for the right story. Your kora begins to play a simple ancient tune, one associated not with kings, but with the artisan guilds. You tell the story of a similar dispute that happened in your grandfather's time, between a blacksmith and a woodcarver over a flawed axe handle. You recount the argument, the evidence presented, and the wise decision reached by the Griot of that time, a decision that established a principle of shared responsibility in craftsmanship. You don't declare the weaver right and the dyer wrong. Instead, your story illuminates a traditional principle that guides them to a solution. The precedent you recount is the law. Your performance of the story is the act of judgment. The authority comes not from a king's decree, but from the remembered wisdom of the ancestors. This role as a living legal archive is one of your most sacred duties. You hold the precedents for property rights, inheritance laws, water rights, and marital disputes. This body of knowledge, this case law, is far more flexible than a rigid, written code. It's adaptable, based on principles rather than strict rules, and it's accessible to everyone through the medium of story. But your guardianship of customs goes far beyond legal dispute. It touches every key moment in a person's life. Here's a beautiful example, the Kaya Th, the naming ceremony for a newborn child. A week after a baby is born, the family and community gather. It is your job as the Griot to announce the child's name to the world for the first time. But you do much more than that. As you hold the baby, you don't just say, "Her name is Benta." You declaim it. You sing it. You place that small child into the grand, epic tapestry of her lineage. You recite her genealogy. This is Benta, daughter of Kadiatu, granddaughter of Fatu, whose ancestor was the sister of the great Faa Goli, the trusted general of Sanjayate. You connect this new, tiny life to the chain of history, giving her not just a name, but a place in the story, an identity rooted in the past. It's a profound act declaring to the child and to the world that she is not an island, but the latest link in a long, unbroken chain. This function of the Griot has led to a fascinating debate among scholars of law and history. Was the Griot a passive chronicler or an active legislator? When you recount a legal precedent, are you merely reporting on a past event like a historian? Or are you actively selecting and framing that story to create a desired legal outcome in the present, like a judge? One school of thought argues that the Griot's primary duty was to historical accuracy, to preserve the story exactly as it was handed down. To change it would be a betrayal of the craft. But another perspective suggests that this is a modern distinction that wouldn't have made sense at the time. They argue that the very act of choosing and telling a particular story in a dispute was the legal process. The Griot was not just a historian. He was a jurist whose medium was narrative. The past wasn't a fixed, dead thing to be studied. It was an active, living force to be wielded for the maintenance of present-day social order. You feel this tension in your work every day. You are the custodian of the truth, but truth in your world is not about objective facts and figures. It is about maintaining social harmony, reinforcing community values, and ensuring that the ancestors' wisdom continues to guide the hands of the living. The stories you tell are the very sinews of this society, binding people to their past, to their laws, and to each other. While you hold court in the world of men, a world of statecraft, law, and formal diplomacy, you are acutely aware that you are only telling half the story. History is not a single river. It is a braided stream, and another powerful current flows in parallel to yours. Your sister, or perhaps a female cousin who grew up alongside you, is engaged in a parallel art. She is a Jelimuso, a female Griot, and her domain is just as crucial as yours, though it is often veiled from public view. You have mastered the kora with its intricate melodies. Her primary instrument is often different. She might use the kare and yan, a simple but effective percussion instrument, a tube of iron often serrated, which she scrapes with a metal rod. It produces a sharp, rhythmic, metallic sound that cuts through the air, providing a percussive backbone for her true instrument, her voice. And what a voice it is! It is trained not just for power, but for nuance capable of expressing the deepest sorrow, the most biting wit, and the most effusive praise. While you learned the grand epics of war and politics, she mastered the genealogies of women, the histories of the great queens and mothers, and the subtle art of social commentary. Her stage is not the king's great hall, but the even more intricate world of the royal women's quarters. Here, among the king's mother, his wives, and his sisters, a different kind of power is wielded. It is a world of quiet influence, fierce loyalties, and subtle rivalries. And the Jelimuso is its scribe, its commentator, and its conductor. She is the confidant of the queen mother, the praise singer for the king's favored wife. She knows who is in favor and who is not. She knows the secret hopes and fears of the most powerful women in the empire. Her songs can soothe the tense rivalry between co-wives or subtly stoke the flames of ambition. Here's a specific, vital role she plays when a young woman of noble birth is to be married. The Jelimuso takes center stage. In the days leading up to the wedding, she will stay with the bride, preparing her not just physically, but psychologically. She sings songs of the great women of the bride's lineage, reminding her of the strength and dignity she carries in her blood. She gives her advice, veiled in proverbs and stories, on how to navigate her new life in a different family. On the wedding day itself, her songs are a shield, praising the bride's beauty, her virtue, and her family's prestige so lavishly that no one would dare to whisper a negative word. She is part historian, part life coach, and part public relations agent all in one. This brings us to a fascinating area of scholarly debate regarding the power of women in these empires. Were the Jel merely the keepers of soft history, the stories of women, marriage, and birth, while the men handled the hard history of politics and war? Or were they shrewd political operators who wielded immense influence through indirect channels? Some historians argue that by advising the Queen Mother or the king's favorite wife, a skilled Muso could shape state policy more effectively than many of the king's official male counselors. Imagine the Queen Mother, having been briefed by her Muso on the mood of the market women, or the quiet grumbling in the weaver's quarter, saying to her son, "The king, my son, the people are weary. Perhaps this is not the time for a new text." Is that her own opinion, or is it a carefully planted seed from her Griot? The lines of influence are deliberately blurred. You, as a male Griot, understand this dynamic perfectly. You have access to the king's ear, but she has access to his heart through the women he loves and respects the most. You both hold pieces of a puzzle that is only complete when put together. You might know the official reason for a treaty, but she might know the secret promise made between the king's mother and the envoy's sister that truly sealed the deal. She is your counterpart, your colleague, and in some ways your friendly rival. The history you guard is the official, public transcript of the empire. The history she guards is the intricate, behind-the-scenes story of how things really get done. Without her voice, the song of your people would only be half sung. You walk through the bustling afternoon market, a space you know as well as the strings of your kora. As you pass, a tangible change ripple through the crowd. The chatter softens, the haggling pauses. Men and women alike incline their heads, their gestures a mixture of deference and greeting. They make way for you, clearing a path not out of command, but out of a deep, ingrained respect. You are the king's voice, the people's memory, a walking vessel of their identity. In these moments, you feel the warmth of your position, the honor of being so essential to the lifeblood of your community. But then you notice the subtle occurrence. A mother, while bowing her head, quietly pulls her child a little closer, as if shielding her from a force she doesn't understand. A group of young men, laughing loudly a moment ago, fall silent and studiously avoid your gaze as you approach. It's not hostility. It's something more complex. It's awe, tinged with a distinct edge of fear. You are deeply respected, but you are not entirely trusted. You are essential, but you are also an outsider. This is the great paradox of your life. The source of this fear is the very tool of your trade, your tongue. Your words are not like the words of other men. They have a supernatural weight, a spiritual power. Your praise, your mosiri, can elevate a family, polishing their name until it shines like burnished gold for generations. A generous patron will be rewarded with songs that immortalize his generosity, ensuring that his great-grandchildren will be honored because of his deeds today. But the flip side of this power is terrifying. Your criticism, a practice known as satire or nainimo, can be a curse from which a family never recovers. If a powerful man were to commit a great injustice and refuse to atone for it, you have the power to compose a song about his cowardice, his greed, or his dishonor. A song that, once sung, can never be unsung. It would attach itself to his family name forever, a permanent stain on their reputation. You hold social life and death on your tongue, and people are rightly wary of that power. This separates you. You are part of the Nymakala, the artisan groups who are the masters of transforming the world through their specialized skills. You are distinct from the nobles, the Horon who rule and fight. You are also separate from the farmers and laborers who make up the majority of the population. This isn't just a professional distinction, it's a fundamental social division. You socialize within your own community of artisans. Crucially, you marry within it. For you to marry a woman from a noble Horon family would be a profound breach of social protocol, a mixing of categories that would make everyone deeply uncomfortable. You are in society, but you are not fully integrated of it. You exist on a parallel track, essential but always slightly apart. Here is a strange and powerful illustration of your otherness, a custom that speaks volumes about how your spiritual power is viewed. In some traditions, it is believed that the NYMA, the life force of a Griot, is so potent that it is dangerous for their blood to be spilled upon the earth. Even in death, your power must be contained. If a Griot were to be condemned to die or upon a natural death in some regions, they would not be buried in the ground like a noble or a farmer. Instead, their body would be placed upright in the hollowed-out trunk of a dead baobab tree. The tree becomes their tomb, a vessel to hold their immense spiritual energy and prevent it from polluting the soil. It is a sign of ultimate respect, a recognition of your sacred power, but it is also the ultimate act of separation, setting you apart from the community even in your final rest. This unique and contradictory status is a source of endless fascination for outsiders who study your culture. Historians and anthropologists constantly debate how to interpret your position. Were you a revered elite, placed on a pedestal above the common folk? Or was this reverence a form of social quarantine, a way for the ruling class to control the immense, dangerous power of history by confining its keepers to a gilded cage? Did you see your separation as a mark of honor, a sign of your exclusive and sacred duty? Or did it feel like a form of marginalization, a loneliness born of being too powerful for your own good? The truth, as you know it, is that it feels like both. You walk through the market, feeling the glow of the respect you are given, but you also feel the cool air and the space that people leave around you. It is the price of your gift. You hold the past, the present, and the future in your memory and your voice. You are the keeper of the soul of your people. And to carry such a cargo means you must, by necessity, walk a separate path. Tonight, you are not advising a king or settling a local dispute. Tonight, you are doing what lies at the very heart of your calling. You are the entertainer, the educator, the conduit for the greatest story your people know. The harvest has been good, the moon is full, and the community is gathered. A fire snaps and dances in the center of a wide circle, casting flickering light on the eager faces of children and the more serene, knowing faces of the elders. This is your theater. This is your library. This is your temple. And tonight you will build a cathedral of words, the epic of Sanjay. You let a hush fall over the crowd. You draw it out, building the anticipation. Then the first notes from your kora spill into the night, a familiar, beloved melody that everyone recognizes. It's the theme of the Keda clan, the overture to the grand performance. You begin to sing, and your voice, trained since childhood, is a powerful instrument. You do not simply recite the words. You inhabit them. You start at the beginning with a prophecy. You tell of the 2 hunters who come to the court of Sanjay's father, the king of the Mandan. They bring with them not a prize of meat, but a strange and powerful prediction. The king must marry a hideous, hunchbacked woman named Sojol Kond, for she will bear him the son who will unite the 12 kingdoms of the Mandan and create a great empire. Your voice carries the wonder and skepticism of the court. You paint a picture of Sojol, the buffalo woman, and you make the audience see both her physical ugliness and the fierce, unyielding spirit that lies within. Then you sing of Sanjay's birth and the disappointment that follows. The prophesied hero is born a cripple. He cannot walk. For years he crawls on the ground, an object of scorn and ridicule, especially from the king's first wife who wants her own son to inherit the throne. You channel the mother's pain, so go on, silent suffering as she endures the taunts. You make the children and the audience feel the sting of the hero's humiliation. You are teaching them a profound lesson, that greatness often comes from the most unlikely of places and that true strength is not always visible on the surface. The turning point of the story arrives, and your performance intensifies. Sojol, pushed to her breaking point by a final insult, confronts her son. I cannot bear this shame any longer. She cries. Sanjay, filled with a sudden, powerful resolve, declares, Mother, I will walk today. He commands the blacksmiths to forge him the heaviest iron rod they can make. You build the tension as the smiths work their bellows as the iron glows white hot. The massive rod is brought to the young prince. He grasps it. He strains. The muscles in his arms pull. Your voice cracks with the strain. The rod bends, then breaks under his superhuman effort. And then, slowly, agonizingly, he rises to his feet. A gasp ripples through your audience, even those who have heard the story 100 times. The hero has finally revealed himself. Here is a small, fascinating detail of the epic that often gets overlooked. After Sun Jayade stands, he goes to a baobab tree, uproots it with his bare hands, and brings it back to his mother so she can have all the baobab leaves she wants for her cooking. It's a display of immense physical power, but it's also an act of profound filial piety. He is not just a warrior, he is a good son. This detail is crucial, reinforcing the cultural value of respecting one's parents. The story continues through Sanjay Atiya's exile, his journeys through neighboring kingdoms where he gathers allies and learns the art of war and leadership. Finally, you reach the epic climax, the showdown with the tyrannical sorcerer king. Suma Aro is a terrifying villain, a powerful magician whose fortress is decorated with the skulls of his enemies. Your voice becomes harsh and menacing as you describe his dark magic. The final battle at Kirene is a spectacle of both physical and magical combat. Suma Oro is seemingly invincible, but Sun Jayade has discovered his weakness, his tona or taboo. Suma Oro can be defeated only by an arrow tipped with the spur of a white rooster. At the critical moment, the arrow flies true. It grazes Suma or O's shoulder, and his power vanishes. He flees, disappearing into the mountains, defeated not just by force, but by a deeper knowledge of his enemy. The historical basis for this epic is a subject of constant scholarly inquiry. Did Sanjay Adekata really exist? Most historians agree that he did, and that he was the historical founder of the Mali Empire in the 13th century. But how much of the epic is literal history and how much is myth, allegory, and poetic license? Suma or O's sorcery, Sanjay Atiya's magical birth. Are these metaphors, or were they believed as literal truth? Scholars compare the different versions of the epic, cross-reference them with the writings of Arab travelers, and use archaeological evidence to try and separate the man from the myth. But as you finish the story, bringing Sanjay back in triumph to found his great empire, you know that for your audience, this distinction doesn't matter. The story is true in the way that matters most. It tells them who they are, where they come from, and what it means to be a hero. The legend of Sanjay is the foundation of your empire, but your history did not end with him. Your repertoire must be vast, covering the deeds of all the kings who followed. And now you find yourself on the road, part of the most magnificent procession the world has ever seen. The year is 1324, and you are one of the favorite Griots in the entourage of the Mansa of Mali, a man whose name will become a global synonym for unimaginable wealth, Mansa Musa. He is Sanjay Atiya's grandnephew, and he has decided to undertake the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca. But this will be no simple journey of faith. This will be a statement. This will be the moment the Mali Empire announces itself to the world. You are part of a caravan that stretches farther than the eye can see. Imagine the scene. There are, by some accounts, 60,000 people. Soldiers in their finest armor, royal officials, merchants, doctors, and slaves, thousands of them, each dressed in fine silk. But it's the gold that defies belief. In front of Mansa Musa walk 500 slaves, and each one carries a staff made of pure gold. Behind him trail 100 camels, and each camel is laden with 300 pounds of gold dust. You are walking in a river of gold that flows across the Sahara Desert. Your job, along with the other Griots on this journey, is to be the soundtrack to this spectacle. Your songs are no longer just for the ears of your own people. They are for the ears of the world. As the caravan moves through the great trading cities of the Sahara, like Wallete and Taghausa, your performances take on a new dimension. You sing not just of Mali's military might, but of its justice, its history, its deep-rooted traditions. You are a cultural ambassador, translating the meaning of your civilization for the foreign merchants and chieftains you encounter. The gold dazzles them, but your stories are meant to impress upon them that this wealth is not the product of mere luck. It is the foundation of a great and ancient society. The journey is arduous. The desert is a harsh and unforgiving landscape. The sun is relentless, and water is more precious than the gold you carry. But the caravan is a moving city, a testament to the logistical genius of the empire. When you finally reach Cairo, the largest, most sophisticated city you have ever seen. The effect is explosive. The Kairenes are accustomed to wealth, but they have never seen anything like this. Mansa Musa and his entourage spend and give away gold with such abandon that they flood the market. Here's a mind-boggling economic fact. Your king's generosity single-handedly depressed the value of gold in Cairo for over a decade. He literally broke the gold market with his piety and largesse. While in Cairo, you witness a fascinating, subtle diplomatic dance. The Sultan of Egypt expects Mansa Musa, as a visiting ruler, to kiss the ground before him. But Mansa Musa is proud. He is the Mansa of Mali, second to no one. He initially refuses. A tense moment follows. It is resolved only when Musa agrees to prostrate himself, but claims he is doing so only before God, not the Sultan. You watch, and you file this story away. It is a perfect example of how to maintain one's dignity while respecting foreign customs, a valuable lesson for any diplomat. Of course, the scale and details of this legendary Hajj are a point of much historical discussion. The numbers 60,000 men, thousands of pounds of gold, come to us mostly from Arab chroniclers who wrote about the event years, sometimes decades after it happened. Were they exaggerating to make the story more impressive? Almost certainly. It's the kind of tale that grows with each telling. Historians try to temper the numbers, to cross-reference different accounts, to get a more realistic picture of the caravan. Was it 60,000 people or a more plausible 15? Ding ding ding. Was it 100 camels of gold or 50? But in a way, the precise numbers are beside the point. The story's true significance is undeniable. Mansa Musa's journey put Mali, and by extension all of West Africa, on the map of the medieval world. European mapmakers began to draw the kingdom of Mali on their charts, often depicting its king holding a giant nugget of gold. For you, the journey is life-changing. You have seen the world beyond your home. You have performed for sultans and scholars. You return with your king, but you are not the same Griot who left. Your worldview has expanded. You bring back new stories, new melodies picked up in the markets of Cairo, new understanding of your empire's place in the world. And you have a new epic to add to your repertoire. The story of the Golden Pilgrimage, a testament to the king who showed the world that history, power, and unimaginable wealth could be found not just in the lands of the north, but deep in the heart of Africa. You are not always performing for kings or traveling across continents. The rhythm of your life is also marked by the more intimate, yet equally important, ceremonies that bind your community together. These are the moments when history is not just recounted, but actively woven into the lives of ordinary people. Today there is a wedding. The daughter of a wealthy leather worker is marrying the son of a respected blacksmith. This is not a royal alliance, but it is a vital one, strengthening the bonds between two powerful artisan clans. And you are at the center of it all. The celebration has been going on for days, a whirlwind of feasting, dancing, and music. But now comes the main event, the moment when the bride formally leaves her family's compound to join her new husband's. It is a moment of joy, but also of great sadness for her parents, and of anxiety for the young woman herself. Your job is to manage this complex cocktail of emotions with your words and your music. You stand before the gathered crowd, your kora in hand. You don't begin with a grand epic. You begin with praise. You turn to the bride's father, and you sing of his skill of the fine saddles and bags that come from his workshop, respected all the way to Timbuktu. You praise his generosity, his wisdom, his good standing in the community. You are reminding everyone of the honor and prestige of the family this young woman comes from. Then you turn to the groom's father, the blacksmith. Your song changes. You sing of the magic of the forge, the power of transforming earth and fire into tools and weapons. You praise the strength and reliability of his clan. You are building a bridge of mutual respect between the two families. Then your focus shifts to the bride herself, who stands with her head bowed, veiled and radiant. The songs you sing for her are different. They are drawn from the repertoire of the Jel, the female Griots. You sing of the great women of her lineage, her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother. You praise their loyalty, their strength, their resilience. You are wrapping her in a cloak of ancestral power, giving her the courage to step into her new life. You are telling her, you are not alone. All the women of your bloodline walk with you today. Here's a curious little detail of the ceremony. At a certain point, you might engage in a form of ritualized begging. You will lavishly praise a wealthy guest, recounting the greatness of their ancestors, until they are socially obligated to give you a gift, coins, cloth, or livestock. To an outsider, this might look undignified, but it's a fundamental part of the economic and social system. It's a form of wealth redistribution, a way for the wealthy to publicly demonstrate their generosity and for you to be compensated for your essential services. It reinforces social bonds through a performance of praise and reward. Your praise is valuable, and this is how its value is publicly affirmed. But it's not all praise and celebration. A wedding is also a moment for advice, and this is where your role as an educator comes to the fore. You will tell stories, often humorous ones, about the challenges of married life. You might tell the tale of a foolish husband who never listened to his wise wife and ended up losing all his goats, or a story about a young wife who was too proud to ask her mother-in-law for help and ended up ruining the family feast. These aren't harsh lectures. They are gentle lessons wrapped in the enjoyable coating of narrative. You are providing the young couple with a cultural roadmap for how to navigate their new roles, using characters and situations everyone can recognize. The historical authenticity of these domestic ceremonies is a fascinating field of study. While epics like Sanjay Ade were performed for centuries, the specific rituals of a 14th century wedding are much harder to reconstruct. Historians rely on a few precious clues. Descriptions from outside observers like the famous traveler Ibn Battuta, who visited Mali just a couple of decades after Mansa Mus's pilgrimage. The lyrics of the songs themselves, which often contain clues about ancient customs, and the modern practices that are believed to have been passed down through generations. Scholars debate how much these ceremonies have changed over the centuries. Are the wedding songs you sing today the same ones your ancestors sang 600 years ago? Or have they evolved, adapting to new social realities while keeping the ancient core intact? It's a classic historical puzzle of continuity versus change. As the ceremony reaches its conclusion and the bride is finally escorted to her new home, you feel a deep sense of satisfaction. You have done more than just entertain. You have reaffirmed social bonds, honored to families, calmed a young woman's fears, and passed on the collective wisdom of your culture. You have taken a simple life event and infused it with the power and weight of history. The king's court may be the head of the empire, but these ceremonies are its beating heart, and your voice is the rhythm that keeps it alive. The world you have known, a world where history lives in the human voice and the notes of a kora, is about to encounter a powerful and transformative new force. It doesn't arrive with an army or a caravan of gold. It arrives with a book. Islam has been present on the fringes of your empire for centuries, a religion of merchants and desert nomads. But under kings like Mansa Musa, it has moved to the very center of power, and with it comes the profound influence of the written word. At first, you see the scholars and the scribes as colleagues in the business of knowledge, occupying a parallel but separate sphere. You are the master of the spoken epic. They are the masters of the written law. You perform in the manned languages for the court and the people. They write in Arabic for theological study and long-distance correspondence. The king values you both. He calls on you to inspire his soldiers with the story of Sanjay Ade before a battle, and he calls on them to write a letter to the Sultan in Morocco. It seems that the two traditions can coexist, each supreme in its own domain. You see the great mosques and universities being built in cities like Timbuktu and Chen. They are magnificent structures of molded earth. Their unique architecture a testament to the fusion of Saharan and Sahelian styles. You watch as caravans arrive not just with salt, but with books, precious manuscripts of Islamic law, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. Timbuktu is becoming a legendary center of learning, a city whose wealth is measured not just in gold, but in knowledge. You feel a sense of pride in this development. Your empire is not just powerful, it is sophisticated and intellectual. But slowly, subtly, you begin to feel a change in the air. The written word has a kind of authority that is different from your own. It is fixed, permanent, and silent. A written contract can be stored and retrieved unchanged years later. A judge's decision recorded by a scribe can be cited verbatim. This new technology of memory begins to compete with your own. A nobleman in dispute might once have relied solely on your recitation of precedent. Now, he might also seek out a scholar to produce a written deed of ownership, penned in elegant Arabic script. It's a new kind of proof, a new source of truth. Here's a small but significant detail you observe. The sons of the nobility are increasingly being sent not just to learn the traditions from you, but to study the Quran and the Arabic language at the mosque schools. A new kind of prestige is emerging, one associated with literacy and the scholarly tradition of the wider Islamic world. Your art is still revered as the authentic, ancestral voice of the Mandan people, but this new, text-based knowledge carries with it a different kind of global cachet. This creates a complex and sometimes tense interaction that you must navigate. At court, you might tell the story of a great king's generosity, and a moment later an Islamic scholar might read a passage from the Quran about the virtues of charity. The two lessons reinforce each other, but they come from different sources of authority, one from the ancestors of the Mandan, the other from the Word of God as revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. You must learn to weave these two traditions together. When you praise the king, you might now add phrases that also cast him as a great Muslim ruler, a sultan and a defender of the faith. Your ancient art begins to adapt, incorporating new themes and new vocabulary to stay relevant in a changing world. This period of cultural intersection is a source of continuous debate for historians. Was the rise of literacy in West Africa a threat to the Griot tradition, the beginning of its slow decline, or did it simply create a new, hybrid system of knowledge? Some scholars argue that the written word inevitably demoted oral tradition, turning it from the primary source of truth into a form of folklore. They point to the fact that much of what we now know about the Mali and Songhai empires comes from the written accounts of Arab scholars and travelers. But other historians argue that this view is too simplistic. They contend that for the vast majority of the population, life remained resolutely oral. The Griot remained the most important and effective medium for communicating history, law, and culture to the people. Writing was an elite skill for specialists, while the spoken word remained the language of life. The two systems likely existed in a state of dynamic tension, sometimes competing, sometimes collaborating for centuries. You feel this tension personally. You look at a written manuscript with a mixture of respect and suspicion. It is powerful, yes, but it is also cold. It has no voice, no soul. It cannot adapt its telling to the mood of the room. It cannot look a man in the eye. It cannot answer questions. You know in your heart that your art is a living thing, a warm-blooded history that a cold, silent page can never truly replace. Yet you also know that the world is changing, and that you and your descendants must find a way to make your voices heard alongside the quiet, insistent rustle of the written page. The golden age of the Mali Empire, the era of Mansa's splendor and the intellectual flourishing of Timbuktu, cannot last forever. Like all great empires, it carries the seeds of its own decline. Internal strife begins to eat away at the foundations. After Mansa Musa, a succession of weaker, less capable rulers come to the throne. Brothers fight brothers for power. The vast empire, stitched together by conquest and delicate alliances, begins to fray at the edges. You witness this decay from your privileged position at court. You see the strong, centralized authority that once held the state together begin to crumble. Powerful provincial governors like the one you once visited on your diplomatic mission start to withhold their tribute more brazenly. They act less like subjects and more like independent kings. The empire's wealth, once a source of strength, now becomes a lure for rebellion and infighting. The stories you tell, the epics of unity and the glorious reign of Sanjay now carry a new, more desperate edge. You are no longer just celebrating a reality. You are trying to remind a fractured court of what it has lost, of the ideal it is failing to live up to. To the east, the new power is rising. The city-state of Gao, once a vassal of the Mali Empire, begins to assert its dominance under the ambitious Songhai dynasty. You hear reports of their charismatic and ruthless leader, Sunni Alibar. He is a brilliant military strategist, but also, according to the chroniclers in Timbuktu, a cruel and impious man who persecutes their scholars. In 1468, the unthinkable happens. Suniao his forces conquered Timbuktu, the intellectual and commercial heart of the region. The great Mali Empire has lost its most prized jewel. This is a time of profound crisis for you and your craft. Your entire world is built around a system of patronage that flows from the Mansa and his nobles. As their power and wealth diminish, so does their ability to support you. You are the historian of a dynasty that is losing its grip on history. What is your role now? Do you remain loyal to your failing patrons, singing songs of a glory that is rapidly fading into memory? Or do you adapt to the new reality? This is the hard, pragmatic choice that all Griots in times of upheaval must face. Some, out of deep loyalty, stay with the Keita dynasty of Mali, following them as their empire shrinks back to its original heartland, becoming once again a small kingdom among many. They become the keepers of a nostalgic history, a history of what once was. But others, seeing the tide of history turning, must make a difficult decision. They travel to Gao, the new center of gravity, and offer their services to the rising Songhai kings. They must learn new genealogies, new histories, and new praise songs. Here's a small, telling detail of this transition. When a Griot shifts their allegiance to a new dynasty, they don't simply erase the old histories. Instead, they begin the subtle, artistic process of re-weaving the narrative tapestry. They find ways to connect the new rulers to the old legends. Perhaps the new king's grandmother had a distant connection to the Keita line. Perhaps a prophecy can be rediscovered that foretold the rise of this new power. You are not crudely falsifying history, you are performing the essential work of legitimating, creating a narrative that allows for a smooth transfer of power and prevents society from collapsing into chaos. You are ensuring continuity, even in the face of radical change. This process of adaptation and survival is a key point of discussion for historians. It raises fundamental questions about the nature of the Griot's rule. Were they loyal retainers bound by honor to a single family line? Or were they professional freelancers, pragmatic artisans whose ultimate loyalty was to the stability itself, and to whoever was best able to ensure it? The evidence suggests that both models existed. Some Griot families were known for their unshakable loyalty to a single clan through thick and thin. Others were known for their adaptability, their ability to serve power, wherever it resided. Scholars who favor the freelancer model argue that this pragmatism is what allowed the Griot tradition to survive the fall of countless empires. Your allegiance wasn't to a king, it was to the art of Elia itself. As the Songhai Empire rises to become the new hegemon of West Africa, you see this process firsthand. The court at Gao fills with poets, scholars, and Griots. The fundamental structures of society, the artisan castes, the importance of oral tradition, the role of the Griot as advisor and historian do not vanish with the fall of Mali. They are adopted and adapted by the new rulers. The political map has changed. The names of the kings are different, but the deep cultural grammar remains. The library has not been burned down. It has simply been moved to a new building under new management. And you, the living librarian, must continue your work. The fall of one empire and the rise of another is a familiar rhythm, a story you have been trained to tell. It's a painful but understandable cycle of politics and power. But now, a new kind of ship appears on the horizon, docking at the coastal ledges of your world. These are not the familiar, low-slung vessels of the desert traders. They are tall, strange ships with white sails like the wings of enormous seabirds, and they carry men with skin the color of sand, bearing new goods and a new terrifying hunger. They don't want gold or ivory or salt. They want people. This is the beginning of the great tearing, the transatlantic slave trade, and it will inflict a wound on the memory of your people so deep that it will never fully heal. This is a history that you have no song for. The epic tale of heroes who build empires, of warriors who fight for honor. How do you sing about a village raided in the dead of night, not for conquest, but for human cargo? How do you create a praise song for a chief who sells his prisoners of war, or even his own subjects, to these strange men in exchange for iron bars, brightly colored cloth, and firearm? The very moral grammar of your world is being twisted into something unrecognizable. Your role has always been to weave the story of your people into a coherent, meaningful tapestry. Now you are being asked to chronicle its unraveling. The trade grows from a trickle to a flood, and its poison seeps deep into the interior. The new guns brought by the Europeans create a terrible arms race. A king needs guns to defend himself from his neighbors. To get guns, he needs to provide slaves. To get slaves, he needs to raid his neighbors. It creates a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle of violence. Communities that have lived peacefully side by side for generations are turned into bitter enemies. The social fabric you have spent your life studying and reinforcing with your genealogies and stories is being systematically ripped apart. You are the keeper of the genealogies. This craft, once a source of pride and celebration, now becomes an agonizing task. You recite the lineage of a family, and when you reach the name of a great-uncle, the matriarch of the family begins to weep silently because she remembers the day he was stolen from a field and never seen again. A whole branch of a family tree doesn't wither and die. It is violently chopped off. How do you record this? Do you say he was taken? Do you invent a story of him being killed by a lion to spare the family the shame and pain? Or do you simply stop speaking his name, leaving a silent, gaping hole in the history? Here is the terrible, hidden work that you must now perform, the art of forgetting. You have spent your life mastering the art of memory, but now you must learn to curate it. Some patrons whose wealth is now built on the slave trade may pressure you to erase the histories of the families they have sold. More often, the community itself engages in a collective act of willed amnesia. The memory is too toxic. A family that was complicit in the trade might, over a generation or two, have that part of their history quietly scrubbed from the official narrative you perform. A lineage that was entirely wiped out might be gently grafted onto a surviving one to maintain a sense of continuity. You become a surgeon of memory, cutting away the most gangrenous wounds to try and save the whole. This period presents a profound challenge for modern historians who rely on your oral traditions. They listen to the great epics and the long genealogies, and they are confronted with the debate, where is the slave trade? There are very few traditional songs that explicitly say, and then the white men came and took our people. The trauma seems to have created what some scholars call a historical silence. Did the Griots simply ignore it, deeming it too shameful or too painful to be woven into the heroic narratives? Or is the story there, hidden in coded language? Perhaps a song that speaks of a great sickness that carried people away, or a story of a cruel king from across the water, is actually a veiled account of the slave trade. Scholars painstakingly analyze the lyrics, looking for these hidden transcripts of trauma, debating whether they are reading too much into the text or finally uncovering the carefully preserved memory of the wound. For you, it is not an academic debate. It is the defining crisis of your generation. The tools of your trade, praise, diplomacy, historical precedent, seem inadequate in the face of this catastrophe. Your entire purpose is to give your people a sense of who they are. But now a core part of that identity is lost. You are no longer just the librarian of empires. You have become the archivist of absence, the guardian of a silence that speaks louder than any song. The world that was torn by the slave trade is now being carved up. The men from the tall ships are no longer content to wait in their coastal forts. They are moving inland, armed not just with guns, but with flags, maps, and treaties that your patrons cannot read. The era of colonialism has begun. The French are advancing from the west, the British from the south. The ancient empires and kingdoms are being dismantled, their borders redrawn with straight lines on a map in a distant European capital. The very idea of sovereignty, as your people have understood it for 1,000 years, is being erased. Your role, once again, undergoes a profound and disorienting shift. You are the historian of kings who are no longer kings. You sing the praises of chiefs who are now district officers in the colonial administration. Your world has been turned upside tilted. You watch as a young French lieutenant, barely a man, summons a gray-haired chief, a man whose lineage you can trace back 20 generations, and speaks to him as if he were a child. The old systems of power and authority have not just been defeated, they are being systematically humiliated. The new colonial administrators look at you with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. Some see you as a minstrel, a wandering bard, a charming but primitive relic of a bygone age. They might ask you to perform for a visiting European official, treating you as a piece of exotic local color, a bit of entertainment to liven up a dull afternoon. They listen to your epic songs, but they don't understand that they are listening to a legal code, a political constitution, and a sacred text all at once. To them, it's just a long repetitive song with a funny-sounding instrument. Others, the more scholarly ones, the ethnographers and anthropologists, see you in a different light. They recognize that you are a repository of immense knowledge. They come to you with notebooks and, eventually, with clumsy, wax-cylinder recording devices. They ask you to recite the genealogies to tell the epics. They are trying to salvage your culture before it disappears under the tide of modernity. You sit with these men for hours, patiently recounting the stories that have been entrusted to you. But you are wary. You know that knowledge is power, and you are not sure what they intend to do with it. You might give them the public version of the story, the milk while keeping the blood, the deep, secret knowledge for your own people. Here's a small but deeply symbolic moment that plays out again and again. A French administrator is trying to settle a dispute between two villages. He pulls out his maps with their neat, precise lines. He consults his written records. The villagers are confused and angry. They try to explain that the real boundary is not a line, but a story about a pact made between two ancestors, marked by a sacred tree that no longer stands. They say, ask the Griot. He knows the truth. But the administrator dismisses you. What is a song compared to a surveyor's map? Your authority, once paramount in such matters, is now officially worthless. The written word of the colonizer has superseded the living word of your people. This clash of knowledge systems creates a crisis of confidence. The young people in the village see where the new power lies. It lies in learning French, in going to the colonial school and getting a job as a clerk or an interpreter. They start to see your ancient art as old-fashioned, the stuff of their grandfathers. Why spend 20 years memorizing genealogies when the future belongs to those who can read and write in the language of the conqueror? The long chain of transmission, the passing of the craft from father to son, from mother to daughter, is under threat for the first time. Of course, historians now debate the true impact of this period. Was colonialism the final death blow for the Griot tradition, turning it from a living institution into a fossilized art form? Some post-Columbian scholars argue that this view is too simplistic and that it buys into the colonizers' own narrative of their overwhelming power. They argue that the Griot tradition went underground, continuing to be the glue that held local communities together, operating in spaces where the colonial state couldn't see. They suggest that while your public authority was diminished, your private, cultural importance may have even increased as you became a symbol of resistance, the keeper of an identity that refused to be erased. This perspective sees you not as a victim, but as a cultural survivor, adapting your art to preserve the soul of your people in a time of occupation. You feel both realities. You feel the sting of the French officer's dismissal. You see the disinterest in the eyes of some of the younger generation. But you also see the way the village elders still look to you. You see the way the children's eyes still go wide when you tell the story of son Jat as defiance. You know that as long as there is a single person left who wants to know where they come from, your job is not yet done. You are no longer the advisor to kings, but you have become something else, something just as vital, the anchor of a people trying not to be swept away by a foreign tide. The colonial tide, after cresting and flooding your world for what felt like an eternity, begins to recede. The 1950 seconds and 60 seconds arrive with a surge of new energy. A new word on every owner slips: independence. One by one, the nations of West Africa are born, casting off their colonial names and taking up ancient, proud ones like Mali, Ghana, and Senegal. But a country is more than just a flag and a seat at the United Nations. A country needs a soul, a shared story to bind together people from different ethnic groups, who were thrown together by the arbitrary lines of a colonial map. And in this moment of creation, the new leaders, the first presidents, turn to you. Suddenly, you are relevant in a way you haven't been for a century. The new president of Mali, Maud Ibio Keita, wants to build a nation. What better foundation than the story of the first great Malian empire? He needs to inspire a sense of national pride, of a history that predates the French by centuries. And so your epic of Sanjayade is no longer just a village tale, it becomes a national narrative. You, the Griot, are brought from the countryside and given a new stage, the national radio station in Bamako. Your voice, once heard only by those gathered around a fire, now travels on invisible waves into homes across the entire country. You are helping to build a new empire, an empire of the mind. Your art is institutionalized. The new governments create national ballets and instrumental ensembles. You, or musicians from your family, are recruited to be part of these official troupes. Your kora now shares a stage with Bolofons stems and dozens of dancers. It's a thrilling, disorienting experience. You perform not in the intimate courtyard of a patron, but on a brightly lit proscenium stage for a seated audience that includes for undignitaries. Here's a detail of this new reality that highlights the profound change. The epic of Sanjayade, which in its proper telling could take you 3 days to perform, must now be condensed. For a performance at the National Theatre, it might be edited down to a 2-hour spectacle. If the troupe goes on a European tour, you might be asked to present a version that lasts only 15 minutes. You must distill the essence of the story, the hero's struggle, the mother's sacrifice, the final triumph, into a short, potent, theatrical package. The long, meditative genealogies are cut. The subtle legal precedents are removed. What remains is the powerful, dramatic heart of the story, polished and made spectacular for a new kind of audience. This leads to the great debate that rages among cultural critics and historians to this day. Did this nationalization of your art save it, or did it gut it? One side argues that leaders like Guinea's Sekou Touré, by creating world-famous troupes like Les Ballets Africans, gave the Griot tradition an unprecedented global platform. They saved it from being dismissed as a relic and gave it a vibrant new life as a symbol of African pride and artistic genius. They argue that this was a necessary evolution, adapting the tradition to ensure its survival in the modern world. But another school of thought argues that something essential was lost in the process. They say that when you take the story out of its ritual context, when you remove the intimate relationship between the storyteller and a specific patron, when you shorten it for a theatrical stage, you strip it of its true power, its NYMA. It ceases to be a living history and a legal code, and it becomes mere entertainment. It becomes a museum piece, beautiful to look at, but sealed behind glass, its spiritual energy contained and neutralized. You feel this tension in your own life. You are proud to represent your country on a stage in Paris or New York. But you also know that the 15 minutes of glory on stage is a different thing entirely from the 3 days of deep, communal history you might share in your home village. Meanwhile, a younger generation of Griots is making an even more radical leap. They see the new electric guitars and amplifiers arriving in the cities. They hear the sounds of Cuban music and American soul on the radio, and they start to experiment. They don't abandon the kora, but they amplify it. They take the ancient melodies you taught them and play them on a Fender Stratocaster. They form bands. The looping, hypnotic rhythms of the K-U-M-Ben-Go become the foundation for a whole new sound, the birth of modern Afropop. The ancient art of J-Elia is flowing through copper wires and being blasted out of speakers, and it's reaching more people than you ever thought possible. The sound of your world has changed. For centuries, the purest expression of your art was your unamplified voice and the natural resonance of the kora, heard by a circle of listeners leaning in to catch every word. Now your nephew comes to you, his eyes shining with excitement. He doesn't carry a new song he has learned. He carries a small plastic box, a cassette tape. "Listen, uncle," he says, and pushes it into a portable player. What comes out is a sound that is both alien and deeply familiar. It is the melody you taught him, the one for the great battle of Kirene. But it is transformed. A powerful bass line thumps like a mechanical heart. Electric guitars shimmer and weave around the ancient tune. And his voice, the voice you trained, is layered with echoes and effects, soaring over the top. He is no longer just a J-E-L-I. He is a recording artist. His stage is no longer the village square or the king's court. It is a small windowless room, padded with foam to swallow all sound. The recording studio. Here, the audience is a single, unblinking eye, the microphone. The elder who judges his performance is the sound engineer, a man who knows nothing of genealogies, but everything about frequencies and compression. The goal is not to remind a patron of his noble lineage, but to create a perfectly polished 3-minute track that might catch the ear of a record producer in Paris, London, or New York. The economics have been turned upside down. You were paid in respect, in gifts of livestock or cloth, in the lifelong security of your patron's favor. Your nephew dreams of royalties, record deals, and world tours. You see young men from your own Griot family, like the kora virtuoso Mori Conte, take this new path and achieve things you could never have imagined. Millions of people who do not understand a single word of Maling Ki are dancing to the rhythms you once used to recount the history of the Mandan. The notes of the kora, once a key to the memory palace of your people, are now the soundtrack to a nightclub in Amsterdam. But this new world also creates a fascinating and controversial social disruption. You hear of a singer who is becoming one of the most famous musicians in all of Africa, Salif Keita. But here is the shocking truth, the detail that makes the elders shake their heads. Salif Keita is not a Griot. He is a Keita. He is a direct descendant of Sanjay Ade Keita himself, a man of noble, royal blood. In the old world, it would have been a greater scandal for him to become a professional singer than for a European king to become a court jester. He was born to be praised, not to be the praise singer. His choice to pursue music, to take on the role of a Griot, was a profound violation of the social order, and for this, he was initially disowned by his own family. His story is a powerful symbol of how the old hereditary system is breaking down, challenged by the new ideals of individual ambition and artistic expression. This entire transformation is the subject of a fierce debate that echoes from university campuses to the tea stalls of Bamako. When a Griot sells his art as a commodity, does it lose its soul? Is a song still Jay if its purpose is not to bind a community together but to sell albums? Some argue that this is a brilliant tact of adaptation. They say that artists like Mori Conte or Tumani Diabate are cultural ambassadors of the highest order, using the global market to introduce the richness of their tradition to the world, ensuring its survival and relevance. They are simply adapting to a new, globalized system of patronage. But others mourn what they see as a loss of function and a dilution of the sacred trust. They argue that the Griot's responsibility is to a specific community and history, not to the whims of the international music market. When you shorten an epic, remove the genealogies, and set it to a disco beat, you may be creating a great pop song, but you are no longer performing Jayalaya. You are mining a sacred tradition for commercial content. They worry that the young generation is learning the melodies, but not the deep knowledge, the responsibilities, and the history that those melodies are meant to unlock. They are learning the keys, but they are losing the library. You hold your nephew's cassette tape in your hand. The plastic feels cheapened for uncompared to the smooth, worn wood of your kora. You listen to the song again. It is loud, commercial, and designed for a world you barely recognize. And yet, beneath the synthesizers and the drum machines, you can still hear it. The melodic line that has been passed down for centuries is still there. The spirit of the story, though dressed in strange new clothes, is alive. The library hasn't closed, it has become a global broadcast. And you don't know whether to be proud of its reach or worried about what is being lost in translation. In the late 1970s, a story you have always known, the story of a family torn apart, of a boy taken from his home and forced across the great water, suddenly explodes into the consciousness of the entire world. It arrives in the form of a book, and then a television series called Roots. It is the work of an African-American writer, Alex Haley, who tells the story of his own search for his ancestry. His quest leads him from the United States, through generations of slavery, all the way back to a single name, Kunta Kinte, and a single place, the village of J.U.F. Furry in the Gambia. And how did he make this final, astonishing connection? He made it by listening to a Griot. You watch as the world becomes captivated by this story. Haley described meeting a J.E.L.I. who recited the history of the Kinte clan, and in that recitation was the story of the son, Kunta, who went to cut wood and was never seen again. For millions of people, especially in the African diaspora, This was a moment of profound revelation. The history that had been brutally severed by the slave trade, the history that seemed lost forever, was not entirely gone. It had been preserved. It was sitting in the memory of men like you, waiting for someone to come and listen. The impact is immediate and dramatic. A new kind of pilgrim begins to arrive in West Africa. They are not like the old colonial administrators or the European tourists. They are the great-great-great-grandchildren of the people who were stolen. They come to Ghana, to Senegal, to the Gambia. They are not looking for safari animals or cheap souvenirs. They are looking for a piece of themselves. This roots tourism becomes a powerful cultural and economic force. Villages like Juf Furry become sites of pilgrimage, places where people can stand on the soil of their ancestors and feel a sense of connection that has been denied to them for centuries. And you, the Griot, are suddenly in the international spotlight in a new and complex way. You are no longer just a musician or a local historian. You are the missing link. You are the key that can unlock a lost past. These visitors come to you with a hunger in their eyes. They don't just want to hear a performance, they want to find an ancestor. They want you to look into your vast mental library and find their name, their story. This creates a heavy and, at times, impossible burden. Your genealogies are vast, but they are the histories of the families who remain. The story of those who were taken is, by its very nature, a story of a broken chain. You can tell them the history of the village of the great clans, but you cannot possibly give each visitor the specific personal connection they so desperately crave. You are put in a difficult position, caught between the genuine, heart-wrenching need of the visitor and the limitations of your own archive. Of course, the story of Alex Haley's roots itself quickly becomes a subject of intense academic debate. Historians and journalists began to investigate his claims. Did he really find the definitive story of his ancestor, Kunta Kinte? Or was there a misunderstanding, a mistranslation, or perhaps even a degree of well-intentioned invention on the part of the Griot he met? Some critics argued that the story the Griot told Haley sounded suspiciously like a standardized tale, adapted to fit what the American visitor wanted to hear. They questioned whether a specific, individual family history could truly have survived with that level of detail through so many centuries of trauma and dislocation. This controversy highlights the fundamental clash between two different ideas of truth. For Haley and his readers, truth meant verifiable factual accuracy, the kind a Western historian or journalist demands. But for a Griot, truth has always been more complex. The truth of a story lies in its ability to forge connection, to create identity, and to heal a world. Did the Griot tell Haley a literal, fact-for-fact history? Perhaps not. But did he tell him a deeper truth about the shared trauma of the slave trade and the enduring power of kinship? Absolutely. The debate over roots is a classic example of the world of written, empirical history colliding with the world of oral, functional history. Regardless of the academic arguments, the cultural impact of roots is undeniable. It validated your craft on a global stage. It affirmed that your oral histories were not just myths or folktales, but precious archives of human experience. And it fundamentally changed the way the world saw the history of slavery, not as an abstract economic process, but as a collection of millions of individual stories of stolen lives. For you, it brings a new sense of purpose, but also a new weight of responsibility. You are no longer just a singer of tales for your village. You have become a gatekeeper of memory for a scattered global family, all searching for a way home. Your journey has taken you from the king's court to the recording studio, from the quiet ceremony of a village wedding to the center of a global media event. Now, you find yourself in a new and unexpected role. You are the subject of academic study. The same scholars who once came with their clumsy wax cylinder recorders now arrive with digital recorders, video cameras, and grant-funded research projects. They want to understand not just the stories you tell, but the very mechanics of how you tell them. Your ancient art is now being analyzed, cataloged, and deconstructed by the modern university. You spend long afternoons with a young PhD student from a European university. She is kind and respectful, but her questions are unlike any you have been asked before. She isn't asking for the story of son Jayade's mother. She's asking what mnemonic techniques do you use to recall the genealogies? Is there a formulaic structure to your praise songs? How much of a performance is memorized and how much is improvised? You are being asked to explain the magic, to lay the inner workings of your mind bare. You find it difficult to put into words a process that has become as natural to you as breathing. How do you explain that the melody of the kora is the map to your memory? How do you describe the feeling of a story flowing through you, rather than being recited by you? This intense academic scrutiny creates a new kind of challenge. Your oral traditions, which have always been fluid, living things, are now being captured and frozen in time. A scholar records your version of an epic on a specific Tuesday afternoon. That recording is then transcribed, translated, and published in a book with footnotes under critical introduction. Your performance has become a text. This text can now be studied by anyone in the world. But in becoming a fixed text, it loses the very quality that makes it oral, its ability to change, to adapt to the audience, to respond to the moment. This leads to a central, passionate debate that circles through the halls of academia. The fundamental question is, can a predominantly oral history ever be truly and accurately understood by a culture that is built on the written word? Some scholars, often called literalists, believe that by carefully recording and cross-referencing many different versions of an oral tradition, they can reconstruct a core original version and use it as a reliable historical source. They believe they can filter out the poetic license and the flattery to find the hard kernel of historical fact. But another school of thought, the relativists, argues that this entire approach is flawed. They say that oral history is not like a corrupted written document that you can fix with a bit of editing. Its very nature is to be fluid and functional. A Griot story isn't meant to be a detached, objective account of the past in the Western sense. It is meant to do something in the present, to settle a dispute, to legitimize a ruler, to teach a moral lesson, to bind a community together. To treat it as a simple factual database is to fundamentally misunderstand its purpose. They argue that every performance is its own unique, valid truth, created for that specific time and place. You see the effects of this debate firsthand. Two scholars might come to you with a disagreement. One says, in the version of the epic you told my colleague last year, you said the hero had 3 sisters. But in the version you told me today, you said he had 2. Which one is correct? You want to explain that they are both correct. The number of sisters might change depending on which lineage in the audience you wish to honor that day. The detail is less important than the function of the story. But this kind of fluid, functional truth is deeply frustrating to a mind that is trained to look for singular, objective facts. You, the living librarian, have become a primary source for the historians trying to write the story of your world. But you are a source they find both fascinating and maddening. You hold the key to a history that was never written down, a history that stretches back for millennia. But the knowledge you hold does not conform to their rules. It challenges their most basic assumptions about what history is and how it should be preserved. You have become a mirror, forcing the world of written history to confront its own limitations, its own biases, and its own inability to capture the full, complex, living truth of the human past. Let's leave the scholars with their notebooks and their debates for a moment. Let's let their arguments fade into a gentle, academic hum in the background. Because in all this focus on you, the storyteller, we've overlooked the other half of the equation. The half that is just as important, the listener. Tonight, you are not the Griot. You are not the king, the scholar, or the tourist. You are just a child, sitting in the dust, your chin resting on your knees, watching the firelight dance on the storyteller's face. And you are learning a skill that your own modern world has almost completely forgotten, the art of true listening. In your 21st century life, listening is often a passive, secondary activity. You listen to a podcast while you drive. You listen to a playlist while you work. You half listen to a friend while you scroll through your phone. Your attention is a fractured, divided thing. But here, in the circle around the fire, listening is a primary act. It is a form of active, focused participation. There are no distractions. There is only the darkness beyond the fire, the hypnotic notes of the kora, and the voice of the jeli. You are not consuming content. You are receiving a tradition. Your entire body is engaged in the act. Your eyes are fixed on the Griot, watching his hands on the strings, his facial expressions that give nuance to the story. Your ears are tuned to every subtlety of his voice, the rise and fall of his tone, the strategic pauses that build suspense. Your mind is working, building the world he describes, seeing the great battles, feeling the hero's sorrow. But most importantly, your presence, your focused attention is part of the performance. The Griot feels it. He feeds on it. An attentive, engaged audience can elevate a performance, inspiring the storyteller to new heights of artistry. A distracted, restless audience can cause the story to falter. In this circle, listening is not just a courtesy, it is a responsibility. You are the vessel into which the story is being poured. Here's a concept that is woven deep into the culture. Wisdom does not come from speaking, it comes from listening. There is a Mandarin proverb that says, "The mouth is the source of all disputes, but the ear is the path to peace." Your culture often values eloquence, quick wit, and the power of speech. But here, the ear is revered as the organ of true learning. A great man is not the one who talks the most, but the one who listens best. You are taught from childhood that to interrupt an elder, or Griot, is not just rude. It is a foolish act of closing yourself off from the wisdom that is being offered to you. You are learning that listening is an act of humility and respect. You are also learning to listen with a different kind of memory. You are not listening for sound bites or key takeaways that you can't read later. You are absorbing the entire narrative, its structure, its rhythm, its moral undertones. You are storing it away, not as a collection of data points, but as a complete, holistic story. This is how the tradition survives. The children in the circle who listen most intently are the ones who will be able to correct a storyteller in their old age. The ones who will ensure the story is passed on intact to the next generation. The audience is not just a receptacle, it is the quality control department. This brings us to a quiet debate happening today, not just among academics, but among parents and educators. In a world of infinite distraction and 15-second video clips, have we lost the capacity for deep listening? Are we creating a generation that is incapable of the sustained attention required to absorb a complex narrative? Some argue, pessimistically, that this ancient skill is indeed dying. They suggest that our brains are being fundamentally rewired for constant stimulation and rapid context switching, making the slow, immersive experience of listening to a long story almost impossible. But others offer a more hopeful perspective. They argue that the desire for oral storytelling has not vanished. It has simply migrated to new technologies. They point to the explosive popularity of audiobooks and long-form narrative podcasts. Millions of people willingly plug themselves in for hours at a time to listen to a single unfolding story. Perhaps, they suggest, we are not losing the ability to listen, but are merely rediscovering it in a new form. Perhaps the human need to be told a story is so fundamental that it will always find a medium. The question is whether listening to a book through headphones while jogging is the same, neurologically and culturally, as sitting in a silent, communal circle sharing a single, unmediated voice. As the Griot's story comes to a gentle close, a feeling of deep, shared contentment settles over the circle. You have not just been entertained. You have participated in a communal act of remembering. You feel connected to the storyteller, to the people sitting beside you, and to the long chain of ancestors who have heard this very same story under these very same stars. You have exercised a mental and spiritual muscle that you rarely use. And you realize that the most profound wisdom from the Griot tradition may not be in how to tell a story, but in how we are meant to hear one. The fire in the village square has burned down to glowing embers, its light soft and warm. The story is over, but it is not finished. It will never be finished, because the echoes of the Griot's voice, the ripples from the notes of the kora, have traveled far beyond the baobab tree, far beyond the shores of West Africa. They have seeped into the very bedrock of global culture, often in ways that are so deep and fundamental that the world doesn't even recognize their source. The Living Librarians collection has gone viral, and its influence is now everywhere. Think of the music. Think of the blues, that raw, soulful sound born in the cotton fields of the American South. Where did that sound come from? Listen closely to an old recording of a bluesman like Blind Willie McTell, his voice full of aching stories, his fingers dancing on the strings of his guitar. Then listen to a recording of a Griot from Mali. The connection is unmistakable. The vocal style, with its conned response patterns, the use of stringed instruments to create a dialogue with the voice, the bending of notes to convey deep emotion, the telling of stories of hardship and endurance. Many musicologists argue that the blues is a direct descendant of the Griot tradition, a memory carried in the souls of enslaved Africans and reborn in a new world. The kora became a guitar, the manned languages became English, but the deep grammar of the music, the Jalaya itself, survived the brutal journey. This musical DNA then went on to conquer the world. The blues gave birth to jazz, to rock and roll, to soul, to hip-hop. When you listen to a rapper telling the story of his neighborhood, praising his crew, and boasting of his lyrical skills, you are hearing a modern, urban echo of the Griot's praise songs and epic battles. The instruments have changed, the context is radically different, but the core function, the telling of a people's story through rhymed, rhythmic, powerful language, is a direct continuation of the ancient art. The Griot is alive and well on the streets of the Bronx and the stages of London. The influence extends beyond music. Look at modern literature. The idea of tracing one's identity back through generations, the central theme of roots, has become a powerful genre in itself. But even more subtly, the very structure of oral epic has influenced writers trying to capture the sweep of history. The repetition, the digressions, the focus on genealogy and the deeds of heroes and villains, these are all techniques that have been borrowed from oral storytellers to give written novels the feel of a grand, spoken narrative. And yet, this global diffusion brings with it a complex and sensitive final debate. When is influence appreciation, and when is it appropriation? As the sounds and stories of the Griot tradition become more popular, they are often absorbed into the global cultural marketplace, stripped of their original context and meaning. A fashion designer might use the intricate patterns of a Malian textile without understanding their significance. A pop star might sample a kora riff for an exotic flavor in their song without crediting the musician or understanding the history of the melody. Scholars and cultural critics debate where this line lies. Some argue that culture is always a story of borrowing and mixing, and that this global spread is a beautiful thing, a sign of a shared human heritage. They believe that trying to protect a tradition by keeping it pure is a recipe for stagnation. Others argue that when a dominant, powerful culture borrows from a less powerful one, especially one that has been subjected to colonialism and exploitation, it is not a fair exchange. It can be a form of theft, another way of taking resources without giving proper credit or compensation. They argue for a more ethical form of engagement, one that acknowledges the source, respects the context, and supports the original artists. For you, this is the final modern paradox of your ancient craft. Your tradition, once the exclusive property of a few hereditary families, now belongs to the world. It echoes in 1,000 different forms, a testament to its power and resilience. The library is no longer a single person sitting under a tree. It's a vast, interconnected network of sound and story, a living thing that continues to grow and change, to challenge and to inspire. The voice of the Jalaya has proven to be too strong to be contained by a single continent, a single language, or a single moment in history. It is a permanent and inseparable part of the great human story. And so our journey through the world of the living libraries comes to a close. The fire has died and the first hints of dawn are beginning to soften the edges of the night sky. The voice of the Griot has faded, but the stories themselves now rest inside you, a new addition to the library of your own mind. You can feel the weight of them, the warmth, the centuries of human experience they contain. They are stories of kings and of commoners, of war and of weddings, of immense loss and of incredible resilience. You have walked through empires built on memory and felt the deep wisdom in the simple act of listening. Let the echo of the kora strings become the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Let the great plains of the savanna expand into the vast, open landscapes of your deepest sleep. You are a part of the story now, another link in the long, unbroken chain. The past is not a distant country. It is a soft hum, a gentle presence, flowing peacefully into your dreams. Just now,